Hey folks, I'm Angela Taylor, your host for Unlocking the Club. I want to thank you for joining us today. Today, we're actually going to unlock the club by focusing on prioritizing ourselves. In a recent episode of Sister Talk on Unlocking the Club, Beverly Oden mentioned how important it is for us as Black women to exercise more self-compassion. And that got me thinking about so many times where not only didn't prioritize myself, but I prioritized others and their well-being over my own. As a caretaker, I imagine that many Black women find themselves in a similar situation. And when I think of self-compassion, I think of something that was unlocked in me over the last couple of years. So we all remember where we were 2 years ago, summer of 2020, spring and summer of 2020. And for me, the catalyst for my journey toward more self-compassion started during the George Floyd murder and that tragedy. In the subsequent days, I recall so many people reaching out to me, and oftentimes they weren't reaching out to me to check on me. They were reaching out for me to help them navigate this space. And oftentimes it was somebody that wasn't in my identity. It was somebody who was in a majority or dominant culture identity that wanted to show up fully at work and with their colleagues, and they felt like I can help them in that journey. Because oftentimes I had done it in the past. But for some reason, at that moment, that wasn't enough. That wasn't a moment that I wanted to meet. I actually was still trying to heal and to reconcile what we had all seen on video and what that meant, and all of the trauma we had been experiencing, particularly around unarmed Black people being shot on camera over the last several years. And it was in that moment that I actually sat back and realized that so often I would have said yes to them in that moment. So often I would have put my feelings aside and prioritized what they needed. And in this moment, I couldn't do it. I found myself texting others and saying, you know what? I can't do that right now. I actually need to focus on myself. I actually need to figure out how I can get through what we are all experiencing in real time. And then I actually thought about how long had I been prioritizing others? And I think many of us, I think in passing, we talk about it in conversations with friends and colleagues, but I recall so often, particularly when we were working in person, right? Something would happen over the weekends. And on a Monday, we had to put on our smiles and show up for work, show up fully, not talk about what may be going on, sit at the table across some people that maybe didn't understand what you were feeling, maybe didn't even care what you were feeling, and show up as if nothing was going on. Don't let them see you sweat, right? Rang true for me. All those words that many of our mentors and family members had said to us when we were growing up. Never let them see you sweat. Don't get too high, don't get too low. And in that moment in May of 2020, I just couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't compartmentalize. And for the friends that know me, I am a Hall of Fame compartmentalizer. I couldn't compartmentalize what we had just witnessed and what I needed, and show up fully and ignore what was going on for me somatically and internally. And I think that that is something that is a conversation that we all need to start to have as Black women. How often do we prioritize others in a way that actually sacrifices what we need to be in self-care and to have more self-compassion for ourselves? We're going to talk about that a little bit on this particular show with an extraordinary guest that we'll be joined by. Our special guest today on Unlocking the Club is Amelia Hardy.
Welcome to the Unlocking the Club podcast, where we host honest and direct conversations about journeys of access, personal truth, and reclaiming space. We share our truth so that you can find the key to own your truth, honor your journey, and reclaim your space. Grab your keys, your wallet, your phone, and invite your friends to meet you at the club. Here's your host, Angela Taylor.
On today's episode of Unlocking the Club, I am looking forward to being in conversation with Amelia Hardy. Amelia is the Chief Inclusion and Diversity Officer at Best Buy. Since joining Best Buy in 2014, she has held various roles, including Vice President of Strategic Community Engagement, Health Partnership Senior Director, and Category and Brand Marketing Director. Amelia has had over 20 years of strategic and P&L leadership roles at Fortune 100 companies. Her career experience includes marketing, strategy, brand management, business development, and product commercialization. She is significantly involved within the community and currently serves on multiple national and community boards, including the Boys and Girls Club of the Twin Cities, the Cal Center, and Minnesota Community Care. Amelia has been honored as one of the top 100 national leaders in DEI, the Power 50, and notable executives in the Twin Cities. Outside of work, Amelia enjoys spending time with her husband and their 4 kids, ranging in ages from 4 to 17. She also spends time at dance competitions, kids' activities, and at the local playgrounds. Thanks for tuning in as we unlock the club with our special guest today, Amelia Hardy. Amelia, hey, how are you doing? Thanks for joining us on Unlocking the Club.
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Angela. It's my pleasure. I can't wait to get into the conversation.
I know. I think so many things to unlock with you because I know you are doing the work. And as we just listened to my journey in trying to shift from that healing space that we need to the change space, I'm actually curious for you, who is every day having roll your sleeves up as the leader and the voice around diversity, equity, inclusion at Best Buy, and also deal with your own right self and what you're going through. How are you able to balance those two?
Now, that's a good question because I don't call it work-life balance. I call it work-life integration. And I think the reason why this particular role is one that I inevitably sought is because when I think about the intersection of my passion, of my personal lived experience and my profession, it is this role. It is about serving the community, serving our employees, seeing how I can eradicate disparities. And that's where I find my purpose. And that gives me energy. Even in that, it gets tiring and it gets hard. But being able to help and make an impact and a positive change in that way does energize me at the end of the day. And it's what I think I'm called to do. It's my purpose.
I love that. When you talked about your balance, right? Work-life balance, what is that? I think we all have our own definition. Recently, someone shared with us Stacey Abrams, her definition, and she said it's more like work-life Jenga, right? As you're taking one thing out, like you're just hoping that everything doesn't fall down. You talk about the energy and the passion that's required for you to show up fully in this capacity at Best Buy. Who or what gives you that energy?
I think my family gives me the energy, my belief that this is my purpose from God. I also think just making a change, helping each individual thrive and be their best self gives me a lot of energy. But I will say, like around me, I've put a support network, whether that's good sister friends, whether that is a mentor or a sponsor that can lean in and help me. Also my family, just when they see that I've given a lot and I'm not taking or not nurturing myself, and they pull me aside and make sure that I'm taking care of myself, like all that interconnected community for me really helps me to stay balanced. And not balanced from a standpoint where work is less or life is less, or I've figured out the perfect way to integrate those, but balance from the standpoint of I feel like I'm making a difference. I have the community support around me. I can really focus on what I think I need to do to make the impact.
Well, and you've had various roles in Fortune 100s, as we talked about in your bio, around transformation, right? Whether it's marketing or strategy. And I wonder, is there any difference between the passion and the energy that you need or that's required in those different roles?
I think it's different. I think that for me, being in the inclusion, diversity, and equity space has been personal just because of my personal lived experience. And my parents grew up in a segregated South, and they told me the stories about drinking at colored-only water fountains, the trials and tribulations that they went through, the harassment, the, pure racism. So I think, and then also I grew up in a majority white community in a suburb of Kansas, and just the things that I felt and went through from experiencing racism, feeling like I'm left out. So for me, it's very personal. And I think there's a lot of emotion in that, and sometimes almost like righting a wrong, if you will, wanting to make the experience that my parents had, that I had, wanting to make that experience not applicable for the next generation or for my kids or in the workplace moving forward. So I think that's why there's a lot of emotion there for me. With marketing and business, there's a lot of passion there. It's something I really love to do. I really love consumer needs. Why do people do what they do, buy what they buy? But I think it all pulls through. It's all about needs. And what can I do to help with those solutions and help people thrive and get their needs taken care of? And so, yes, I think there's a different level from just a lived and an integrated attached experience, but the passion for the business, I don't think is any less.
Well, literally, when you hear about folks that are in the role of a DEI practitioner or leader, you hear that DEI fatigue shows up quite often. Like you're pushing that 1,000-pound boulder uphill to a certain extent, but you chose to be in this role. And I read an article that stated that you chose it as a result of the George Floyd murder and that tragedy in your backyard there in Minneapolis that's experienced so many different things from Philando Castile, and it goes on, unfortunately. Why in that moment did you choose, the fire was still happening, to step into this role?
I think for me, and just being honest and transparent and vulnerable, I never wanted to go into the work because that's just, as I explained, I lived it. I heard about it. It was something I dealt with every day. I always say, like, why would I want to do that for a profession when that is my life, right? And I remember talking to even our CEO and the current chief inclusion diversity officer at the time. And my whole purpose has been about making a positive impact, helping others thrive. And I remember our CEO saying, where else at this moment could you make that impact, that type of impact, especially with all that's going on in our own backyard? And I thought about it, and it's so true, right? It's so true. There's much work to be done and much needed in this space. And I could use my business experience, my marketing experience, my communications experience, my strategy experience, and apply it to ID&E in a way that would make a change and a difference for many. And so that's why I decided to go into it. But I can tell you that when people asked me 3 years ago, 4 years ago, is this something that you want to do? Since I was always doing it in some shape or form, whether it was leading an employee resource group or volunteering in the community, I would say, no, it's just something I do because I'm passionate about it. Now, that alignment, again, of passion, profession, and purpose really helps me, I think, to thrive in this role.
I appreciate the passion, profession, and purpose. That alignment is integral, right? And being able to show up at the table and be in those conversations to elicit the change that you were trying to get. And I imagine it's exhausting yet and still. Like, what do you have to do to conjure up the courage to be in those conversations every day? Because it's not Best Buy, right? It's this global entity. And, if we're being frank and we're unlocking the club, right? Like, sometimes they don't see the benefits of this, and we need the business case for diversity, equity, inclusion. And you're like, it's not about the business case, it's about humanity.
It is.
How do you conjure the courage for that?
In the moment of George Floyd and, the helicopters flying over the house, the armored trucks, the protests, the city burning, again, in my backyard, buildings, boarded up, just, trying to answer questions for my kids. What I thought about was my ancestors and what they went through and the protesting, the marching, all the way back, quite frankly, to the slave days. And I felt indebted and emboldened in that moment to have the courage to say, enough, I want to do something to make a difference. And, our CEO said she wanted to do better and I wanted to make a difference. It's a good alignment and it is tiring, but that's where I find the courage. I find the courage in those who have come before me and the shoulders that I stand on. And I also find the courage in the next generation, like I said, wanting it to be different for them, wanting them not to experience some of the things that I know my ancestors did, my parents did, I did. And unfortunately, even my kids right now, do in some instances. But that's the courage that I have. It's not necessarily just about me. It's about making a difference and forging the path for others.
Yeah. I was at lunch the other day, and a colleague from years ago who was older turned to me and another friend that were at lunch and said, the thing that is so frustrating and infuriating for her at this point is that we in our generation have fewer rights than she and her generation had as women. Like when we look at the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and that can be disconcerting, right? That can have you say, like, no matter how hard you work, how much you put into this effort to get change, sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't happen. How can you lend your voice and the platform and the perspective that you have as a powerful Black woman to get change as an organization such as Best Buy?
I think it's important that once you have a venue, a channel, a seat at the table, that you do have the courage to speak up, because that's why you're there. It frustrates me when people finally get there and they forget where they came from, or they forget who they need to advocate for. It's for all the others who should be there and that are not. And so that's what keeps me going. That gives me the courage, and that helps me to use my voice. I also just make sure I use my voice in a way of building relationships, making sure that I have facts and data. Like you said, the business case helps a lot. And my own personal stories and narrative, as well as the narrative and stories of our employees, of our customers, because we are a diverse nation. We're going to continue to be diverse. If you look globally, there's always been diversity in the world. And we have to look like the customers, the employees that we serve, our communities. And that's, where I find the power, the strength to use my voice. And I think that's where I have to keep speaking up. Where there is business, then there has to be a business case for diversity. And that is what I'm trying to do, intersect business with DEI, with ESG. It's a business imperative. They should not be separated. It's integrated. And that's where I'm using my voice to say, like, these things are just as important. This is integral and critical to the success of all businesses, to really have this focus on DEI, ESG, corporate social responsibility, all those things, to your point, that allow us to be humans, to focus on the state of humanity and how we all contribute to the business world that we interact in.
Yeah, well, you talk about using your voice, and I want to lean into that a little bit, because I found early on in my career, first, I not only didn't know what my voice was, but there was a little bit of fear and hesitation to truly use your voice when it was in opposition to maybe whatever the discourse was. So has that always been the case? Have you always felt like you had the agency to use your voice? If not, when did that change, and what was the catalyst for that change?
So, Angela, when I first started my career a couple decades ago, I was in a room, and I was fairly new, the youngest in the room, definitely the only person of color. That was a woman. There was another woman, another man, Black man, who was my colleague. But most were white males and much older than myself. And I had a point of view. I had a perspective on the topic that that we were discussing. And it was really important. Like, I had this great idea. And when I would speak, they would either speak over me or they would repeat what I said and take it as their own. And I got more frustrated, and my voice began to raise. And I was clearly flustered. And so I decided to be quiet. It's that if they're not going to listen, I'm just going to be quiet. I remember walking out of that room, and the gentleman who was a colleague, the Black gentleman, walked up to me and he said, "You have so much to say. And I know that it's important, and I would like to mentor you and coach you so that your voice will be heard and that you can use it in an effective way." And when he said that, I thought it was right, because they had basically silenced me. I just got frustrated and I wasn't going to say anything. But him saying, "You do have something to say," and validating that, and let's find a way to say it, I think led me on my journey to where I am now. And I'm not always comfortable using my voice, but I think it's something you have to push yourself to do. And I can say, like, sometimes when I use my voice, I get all the stereotypes and all the biases that come with it, being too direct, being too aggressive, all that stuff. But just putting that noise aside and saying, what message do I have to deliver and what benefits or good can I bring? And really focusing on that and how that narrative should come to life.
Yeah, I think so often, right, that is, whether it's intentional or unintentional, right, that they do silence people that have a different perspective and a different voice. And the fact that you had an advocate or a sponsor that came in and gave you, that saw you in that moment and saw what you actually needed, but probably knew that the information that you could provide was there.
Right.
So important. And I think so often in the back of our minds, we're telling ourselves, like, right, you don't want to show up as that caricature that people have of us as Black women in the workplace. How do you navigate that? Like, I know you have some young children. Like, how are you going to share with them to show up fully in all of your power and with your authentic voice and perspective?
You know, I think I have learned to really lean into my relationships outside of the meeting. It's like the meeting before the meeting and all those meet and greets that I do, all those building relationships. Because I find if people really know who I am, they know me for Amelia, then a lot of those stereotypes go away. And many people say, oh, that's exhausting to meet with all those people. It's exhausting to do this. It's exhausting to do that. But that's what human relationships are. People want to feel comfortable. And I don't say that it's fair or it's equitable, that we have to disarm or that we need for people to know us or that we have to make that extra push for people to feel comfortable with us. But it is true. And I feel that I do better and I show up better in the room when I know the people in the room and they know me. And so I would tell my kids, really lean into the relationships. Let people get to know you for who you are, so that they're not just looking at you as a Black woman or a Black man, but they are looking at you as Isaac or Elise or Amelia. And I mean, that's equity at the end of the day, right? That's what we're all hoping to get to. But unfortunately, there are a lot of biases and things that keep us from doing that. But I do lean into my relationships. I do lean in, again, to a lot of the stories, humanizing the stories. People might say, like, yeah, but that doesn't really happen. I'll say, I know it does, because it happened to me, or it happened to a colleague we didn't know about, or it happened to a friend. So that's how I'm learning to use my voice, tell the stories, lean into the relationships, lean into the sponsors, the allies, the advocates, because it's not just my voice. I can extend my voice through them.
Well, relationships, we hear that quite often. And I want to unlock more about relationships as well, because I think there's a lot of nuance inside of what you just shared, and it's really important. And the things that you've accomplished weren't easy. And as you have climbed the proverbial ladder in corporate America, I'm sure you're looking to your left and your right and seeing fewer people that look like you. And the truth of the matter is, when we're considering relationships, is that the system isn't going to change anytime soon. So hopefully there's more people that look like you across from the table, and you don't have to effort to help people understand who you are and to build that trust that it actually happens a little bit more organically because we start to see more diversity at the table. But that system is going to move a lot slower than the reality that you have been facing in your corporate career and the day-to-day, is that you may oftentimes be the only one in the room. And so when you talk about relationships, Amelia, like, what does that consist of? How are you building relationships? Do you have to be friends? Or is your relationship, when we're building that social capital, like, is there a different means to an end for you to build that trust and vulnerability that's needed?
I think you can, I mean, I am always empathetic and always real. So I will say every relationship that I build, it matters to me, right? But I do think you have to be strategic about the relationships that you build. There are relationships that are very professional relationships, like they're relationships that I build because that person is an expert and I need their help. With expertise in my field. There are relationships, almost like your personal board of directors, right? There are relationships I build because those people know me and they know how I interact. So they know when I'm on and they know when I'm off, and they're willing to share that with me. There are people that I interact with that are, we don't share the same thoughts or opinions, but we have a relationship because I know that they're always going to be honest with me. And there are people who are just like those good friends that are always going to be Team Amelia no matter what. So that those are the people that I always go to, especially after I talk to those people who are, probably my worst critics, but I need to know what's going wrong as well as what's going right. So I think you have to be very strategic, very authentic in your relationships for sure, but very strategic about broadening your community, your friends, your network to people that don't always look like you, think like you. I think it's important just to have that perspective and that view. And it's necessary in corporate America to have a network that is very diverse in perspectives and experiences. And those people, those advocates, those sponsors, again, that might not look like you, that might have totally different lived experiences, but you can form a relationship so they can be advocates, so they can be sponsors and help you along the way.
So who do you have to be to do that, to show up in that regard every single day?
At one point in time, I think it was all about assimilating for me, even when I look back to trying to fit in, in a predominantly white community growing up. But what I came to realize is that the assimilation part, then I don't thrive. I'm not myself. It doesn't come off as unique. It doesn't come off as authentic even. I don't think it comes off as genuine. What I've learned is when I'm myself, when I'm fairly direct and transparent, but highly empathetic, when I am being truthful and honest, showing respect and high regard, when I show up as me, with a lot of respect and a lot of vulnerability, it goes well. People respond better. So I've started to do that more, just showing up as authentically me and knowing that, hey, it might work for some, it might not work for others, but it's respect. There's a quote that I really love and that I'm starting to embrace more as I lean more and more into me, because it's a journey, right? I mean, it's not something that I think I've reached the peak of being like truly into who I am. I think I'm starting to learn and grow more and more. But James Baldwin says you have to decide who you are and force the world to deal with you, not with its idea of you. And for a long time, people had an idea of me, but that could be real. It could not be, it could be false, right? I always said your perspective of me is not always or your perception of me is not always my reality. But it's not about the idea, but who I am, and really communicating that to people and having them understand who I am for me. And then leaning into that to be successful, to make an impact, to hopefully teach and coach, right? To continue to learn and develop. I think it's all about like coming into yourself, growing into yourself, and starting to be comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah, I love that quote. And it reminds me of one of my favorite TED Talks, The Danger of a Single Story.
Yes.
Right. Which literally is like, right. Like if you only allow people to get you to know you on one dimension, that's the only way that they are going to connect with you. So it's incumbent on you. Like, hopefully they want to get to know you and they get curious about you, but you may have to bridge that gap and share and reveal some pieces of you as well. And it's not falling on me that in a lot of the conversations I'm having with leaders such as yourself on Unlocking the Club, very rarely have I said what's led to success or heard what's led to success being, I'm really good at Excel, or you're right, I'm the best coder in the business. It's been relationships. Like relationships truly matter in a way that, particularly as you are climbing that ladder and you are trying to make sure that your voice is at the table and that you can have the impact that you want, relationships are critical to that. And so I came across a quote about you, Amelia, that really tickled me. It was that the Best Buy CEO was quoted as saying, across numerous leadership roles in our company, Amelia has made those around her better by bringing her experience, belief, passion, and grace to everything she does. What does that entail? And what does that mean to you when you hear those words?
I mean, I have great respect for Corey Berry and the leadership she brings. And I've known her for about 8 years, and just authenticity and the inclusive leadership that she has is inspiring. So first I'll say that. But what it means to me is I'm showing up as a servant leader, and that's the person who I am. I always say, like, I'm a different leader, but that's okay. Like, I am a very different leader than many people. But I think because of that, I'm able to transform things, to do things that are different, to share a perspective that not everyone is thinking, right? Or not everyone might have insight and vision to. So what that means to me is she's seen me for who I am, because I'm now more comfortable in my own skin and showing up as my true and authentic self.
Yeah. Well, a shout out to her. And I wonder, in your perspective, particularly in the work that you're doing, but also in your career in corporate America, the fact that someone in the identity of a woman in an executive role has empathy and is showing up that way and sees you. I don't think that those are not correlated at all, which is the reason why you're doing the work that you're doing, right? Is when we do have more diverse perspectives and representation at the table, things like this happen. People are seen in different ways. And so what are some of the things that you're unlocking in your role at Best Buy to create things like that?
I think definitely we need more leaders like Corey. At Best Buy, we really lean into what we call inclusive leadership behaviors. So that's demonstrating courage, empathy, vulnerability, and grace, and providing people with the tools to show up like that. And not only to have it be a head thing, but also a heart thing. It's about education, awareness. It's about relationships, right? Because if someone is in a relationship with you who might not look like you, but they get to know you, then a lot of those biases and things go away. So it really is about getting to know your people, having leaders not just look at you as a person to do something, but a holistic person, a holistic being, a human that is showing up to work and has many dimensions, many different identities. And that is like what we're trying to do. We're trying to get leaders to think beyond that. I just have to deliver the business results, but also part of delivering business results and being successful is to showing courage, to being vulnerable, to being empathetic, to trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes, and then also to give grace. Like when people make mistakes, say things wrong, misstep, people don't feel like they're going to be canceled, but that you give that grace and say, that's okay. This is a learning moment. We can do something different.
Yeah. When you mentioned being vulnerable, and it triggered for me, like I'm curious as I'm listening to you, and I'm like, we have a mutual friend in Kim Price, a longtime executive at 3M, who speaks highly of you. And this is the first time we've been able to interact, but everything she says is spot on. You are so impressive. You are doing amazing work. It's obvious why, right? You are in this role at Best Buy and have built that vested interest from your peers. And I get curious too, I think as Black women, because we always have to be exceptional, like, right? Black excellence is always showing up for us. What isn't perfect for you? Like, right? Like, I think people can look at you, at others who have achieved such great success and say the road must have been easy. And I know there's been so many obstacles that you've been able to overcome along the way, but there's been a lot of obstacles. And I think that we don't talk about those enough, so that people that encounter an obstacle don't think it's about them, but they recognize it might be the system that we're navigating as well. So I'm curious, what are some of the obstacles that you have encountered along your journey?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say Kim Price is such a dear friend, and much of what I have learned is because she has been an example in corporate America and at a company that I used to work at. You know, when you can see someone who's doing the job and leading in a way that you respect, you can actually say that could be me. And she was one of those people for me that I said she leads in a way as a servant leader with, heart and head, but just so smart and so empathetic that if she can do it, then one day I can do it. So I think, again, to your point, representation at the top and seeing people, if you can see it, you can believe it, and then you can achieve it. It has been hard. I would say I have potholes, detours, dead ends, U-turns, like all of that. Sometimes when I talk about my career journey, it has been hard, and people have paved the way, definitely helped, as I talked about that gentleman who helped me, even Kim being a mentor, a good friend, a sponsor, part of my board of directors, probably more the cheerleader than anybody else. And even Corey as a mentor as someone who has helped navigate corporate America. And even when I was new to Best Buy, just being there to help me understand the networks and the business. But it hasn't been easy. Like, people have not always taken my directness well. People have, if I say something, even factually, sometimes people mislead it. Sometimes I'm pensive. And so I am not quick to speak, and people can read that any way they want to. But I've always, the hard part has been, again, debunking any perception that can be seen as negative and really allowing people to see who I am for me and what that means. If I'm being quiet, it's not being like she doesn't know what she's doing, but it's like she's being introspective. She's thinking. If I'm being direct, it's not about being aggressive, but it's about being transparent and vulnerable. It really is changing that narrative in a way that people see you for who you are. And I do believe the more representation we get, the more inclusive leaders we get, the more allies we have, the more sponsors, the list goes on, the more things that I would like to see, more of this, that I think that people can make mistakes, can hone their communication style, can be vulnerable and show up a little rough around the edges, like I have probably more times than I'd like to admit, and still be okay and still thrive, and not feel like that was it. Like, I made that mistake and that's done. Because there have been days where I felt that, like, I'm never going to recover from this. Or I said that and I didn't mean it, or I showed up like that. But you know what? I can't come back from it. It doesn't matter. I don't want to have that glass cliff effect. I want to make sure that people, when they get to places where when they're promoted, when they're leaders, that they have the support around them and they feel the confidence to continue to succeed.
So when those individuals or yourself have the seat at the table, so you, in essence, unlock the club, right? You were at the table at Best Buy in corporate America, in Minneapolis, St. Paul area, where there's so many Fortune 500, Fortune 100 organizations. Like, you are at that table. Who are the gatekeepers that we need to understand that are there and build relationship with?
It's so hard because I always, when I have mentees, I always say, like, you have to understand that just like any game you play or any business strategy you have, there is a strategy, and you do have to approach it with some thoughts and, like, who are the players? What's the landscape? Like, what is the competition? What do you need to know? You need to put some thought into your career, and you need to know who the people are, who is in a position to help, who might even be in a position that if they don't feel great about you and don't have something good to say about you, can really make a detrimental impact on your career. So for me, it's about finding the sponsors, building the relationships, really understanding the environment in which you're functioning in which you are basically being strategic about, right? To move up, to have the point. Sometimes I say it's kind of like playing a game of chess. To understand where you are and where you want to be and the moves you need to make to get there. Sometimes, again, you might get knocked off, but there might be another path that comes from that. Or maybe you get to where you want to go and you realize, hey, this is great, but there's also something else out there for me. So I really think it's about being intentional about understanding where you want to go and how you're going to get there, and like really being intentional about plotting that path.
That's such an important point, being intentional, because I don't know if this was your experience, but for me, I believe that my career in corporate America was a meritocracy. Mm-hmm. I believe that, like, right, if you do work hard, if you are the best at what you do, then the next opportunity is going to come, and then just rinse and repeat. And that is the truth to a certain level inside of organizations, particularly if you're an individual contributor. But when you're moving into management and trying to get into upper management, into executive roles, it no longer is just about that, right? It is no longer just a meritocracy. Social capital does matter. And so being intentional and not just sitting around and hoping that someone sees how exceptional you are and they're going to give you that opportunity, but you having relationships so that people don't just know about you, they know who you are. Mm-hmm. And they know how to pull you through and how you can help really get to the bottom line. Is that the experience that you have when you kind of take a look at the landscape in corporate America?
Yeah, I mean, I think table stakes, especially for people of color, is you have to do the job and you have to do it well. That's just to stay there. To even be
Amen.
considered, you have to give 110% of yourself all the time. I always say, like, I don't think that I can afford to have an off day, even though I have many, but there, sometimes you feel like you can't. But doing the job, knowing your job, doing it well is job one. Sometimes people will come to me and they're not really doing their job well, but they're talking about, like, I should do all this networking. I should apply for this job. And I'm like, well, you do still have to do your job well. So step one, once you're doing your job well, to your point, you can't just depend on meritocracy and people know you can't just keep your head down and think that somebody's going to tap you on the shoulder. But then you do need to. This was hard for me. Like, talk about a little bit about what you're doing. Share a little bit about your work. I always thought that was braggadocious or boastful, but like other people were doing it and they were moving faster. And it's like a lot of people just didn't know what I was doing, didn't know the work I was doing. So it's just advocate for yourself. If you're not going to advocate for yourself, share what the good things that you're doing, who else will? So I think it's really about doing that and continuously sharing about what value brings to the organization. I'll say a pivot for me is when I first started my career, I was like, I have to be this. Like, I have to be a COO, I have to be a CMO or whatnot. We know that half of the positions that will be here, 3 years from now are not here yet. And then some of the ones we have will be obsolete. So I got away from the, like, I have to be this and thought more of like, what do I do well? What do I contribute? What are my skill sets? And then what am I passionate about and put a lot of energy in? And I started to talk about myself like that as I was navigating my career, building these relationships and saying, this is what I do well. And this is what I'm energetic about. And this is what I like to learn. Where in the organization is that needed? Less about the position, but more about the skills that I'm building, the skills that I have, where I can make the contribution and being flexible and willing to kind of flow, like go with the wind sometimes. And that's hard. But I think that opened a lot of doors for me. And then, with the relationships I built, I learned more and more, like maybe I could be this, or maybe I could do that. And just really continuing to keep that growth mindset of what things are today, it might not be tomorrow. And to continue to thrive in an organization or in life, you have to be malleable. You have to keep your mind open. You have to be willing to ebb and flow, to be agile.
Yes. And keeping your mind open, there's a point that you made that I want to illuminate here. And you talked about, right, it's not that you're not moving forward. It's how quickly you're able to move up inside of an organization. So it's that, am I playing checkers or am I playing chess?
Yes.
And playing chess, to your point, is not just about your network and not just who you know, but it's actually who knows you and what you bring to the table.
Yes.
And so the requirement, right, if you so choose to accept it, is to make sure people know who you are, the work that you're doing, and the results that you're driving inside of your organization from day one. And sometimes people aren't going to share that information, and you have to be the one that is sharing that information when you're sitting in the meeting and not say, well, it was my group or my team, but you take credit when credit is given your way. And that helps to unlock the club in many ways as well.
Yeah, I think it's about being your own best advocate, advocating, sharing your work, sharing what you're doing. Like, I was nervous to share my wins. I thought people would think that I was had a big ego, but come to find out all my peers were sharing their wins and much more, right? And probably sharing a lot of what I was doing. And so you have to do that. I'll also say with the relationships, it's not always what people say in the room. It's also what people did not say. And I had to lean into that a lot too, with the relationships I built with people in the room. When I asked, is everything okay? Did that go well? And there is nothing. It was more about what people didn't say than what they said. So I'd have to go back after the meeting and ask those people who I trusted, what am I missing? What did they want to say but didn't say because of many different things, right? And then really get to know that, because I think that started to unlock the club a lot for me, is getting into those water cooler conversations, the meeting after the meeting, really understand what are the dynamics at play and what's going on.
Yeah. Where the real conversations
conversations go on, yes.
Wow. Fantastic. Well, we've been talking to Amelia Hardy about how she has unlocked the club over the course of her corporate career. And we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back on the back nine to find out a little bit more about Amelia before we wrap up. We'll be right back. Do you want to stop feeling like you have little to no control over your life's journey and instead amplify your life's purpose? You all know me as Angela Taylor, host of the Unlocking the Club podcast, but I am also a business, career, life, and leadership coach, helping my clients to live their best life. Every day, I help my clients discover what they truly want in life, and then unlock the club on how they can live their best life. If you're like many of my clients, you have found yourself over the years prioritizing everyone else and everything else. Your job, your significant other, your family, your friends, your community, the list goes on and on. Well, I'm here to tell you the best thing you can do for others is to invest in yourself. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't need to succumb to the fear of failure. You don't have to be perfect. You don't need to feel like you're being selfish. You simply need to prioritize you. You may be thinking that coaching is for other people, but trust me when I say that we all could benefit from a good coaching relationship. Together, we'll build a plan to help you amplify your gifts, clarify your goals, and accelerate your journey toward the life you desire, which may be finding financial wealth, spiritual health, relationship success, and/or freedom and flexibility. You no longer have to feel like you aren't welcome into someone else's club. Let me empower you to leverage all of your extraordinary gifts and create your own club. Head on over to unlockingtheclub.com to book a free 20-minute introductory call to learn more about our Unlocking Your Journey coaching packages, or use code UNLOCK to get a 15% discount on the 6-month coaching package. Today is the day to invest in yourself. Let's unlock your journey. All right, we are back on the back nine with Amelia Hardy, and we just talked about the real. And Amelia, would love for you to humor us a little bit so we can find out a little bit more about who you are with these questions. And the first one I have for you is, besides your home, what is the place that you feel safest to be yourself?
Beside my home. Oh, wow. I would say that besides my home, I love the beach and just the ocean and the calmness and experiencing that with friends and family. There's something about the power of the vastness and the depth of the ocean that intrigues me. It's something that I'm mesmerized by, but also it just brings me great peace. So I think there is where I've been most introspective and unlocked like some true authentic things about myself.
Well, piggybacking on that, what do you do to center yourself, whether it's while you're at the beach or in other ways? Because we know mindfulness is so important, particularly with the work that you're doing.
Yeah, well, very spiritual. So praying, meditation. I've gotten into my Calm app at nights. I like to take walks, especially when the weather is nice. So I'm in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and around November, my walks stop. And then I kind of dread it until they start again when the weather is better. About May, actually April, May, but I love to be outside. Again, it's about being introspective, having nature around me, the warmth of the sun on my skin. Just something about that is gives me a peace and allows me to really think. You know, sometimes you just need space to think.
Yeah, definitely need the space. Well, and as you were navigating so many different spaces, again, corporate America, the Minneapolis, St. Paul community, what are some things that you still feel need to be unlocked? Is there a club that you're like, you know what, somebody, whether it's me or somebody else, needs to unlock that club?
I think, again, it has a lot to do with wealth and opportunity. I think that needs to be unlocked. Again, there's a table in another room in a bigger house that we still need to get to. But right now we focus on just representation at all levels in the organization. And then I think with that comes true, how do we unlock the wealth? And that will help with the education disparity, with health disparities and all of that. But it's still a lot of work to be done. We were making progress, but definitely still a lot of work to be done to really unlock, the true economic, sustainable, generational wealth that I think will will help us through the next generations to come.
Yeah, such an important conversation. And I think that so often we're a little bit hesitant to actually talk about it. Like we don't feel like we deserve to be in a conversation about wanting to generate wealth.
Yes.
So I think it's an important thing to unlock for sure. Well, and lastly, like any special projects you have going on, or where can our listeners find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. My project really is, because I'm still fairly new in role, I'm learning a lot. Please reach out if you are in a similar role or have best practices or things you'd like to share. What I'm trying to do is learn and then apply. And it's not always about reinventing the wheel, but it's about looking for where people have had success, where people are seeing equity, representation, a sense of belonging, and replicating some of that. So reach out to me if you have some great ideas.
That's such a great idea. And I think that's so important that we can't do it alone.
Yes.
Right? It is going to take a village of DEI leaders and practitioners and strategists working together in their domains for us to be able to unlock this club. And so definitely, like, if you have some insight for Amelia, please reach out. And Amelia's got so much to give and to share as well. So for sure, reach out to her on LinkedIn and follow what the amazing work that Amelia is doing at Best Buy. And as expected, Amelia, so many nuggets that you dropped during this episode. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for the grace. I learned a lot from our conversation today. I'm so appreciative that you showed up and said yes when I invited you to join me on Unlocking the Club. And I look forward to continuing to follow the remarkable work that you're doing at Best Buy. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Angela. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, that was Unlocking the Club with Amelia Hardy. I'm your host, Angela Taylor. Thank you all again for tuning in to Unlocking the Club. Please subscribe, share with your friends. If you get a moment, leave a review or rate the show, and continue to help us unlock the club. Until next time, be well.
Thanks for listening to Unlocking the Club. If this conversation resonated with you, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or your favorite streaming platform so that you can experience every episode. And follow us on social media, where you'll hear about future guests, access special features, and connect with this amazing community. Head on over there and let us know how you are unlocking the club. Until next time, peace.